I don't mind listening to this over again, so.
Okay, so I apologize, guys, but I have one more video for you today.
Yeah.
I know I talked a lot on my last video. I apologize.
Thank you.
It happens, okay?
You're welcome.
But this is what happened. I open up my email and I get hit with this. Auditor DeZoglio invites Governor Healy to file amicus brief in support of the legislative audit. This is a big deal. And I want to explain why this is such a big deal. Now, I don't know if you know what an amicus brief is. I don't understand it. I understand it to a point. It's basically like Healy could act as like in proxy of the lawsuit, as some kind of friend or something like that, and basically support what the auditor is trying to do pertaining the audit and pertaining the lawsuit. So it's basically like Healy is in support of the auditor. So when they go up again with the SJC, that's going to hold a lot of weight, okay? Especially if it's a governor that is doing this. I didn't even read this. I literally just opened it up.
It's amazing how they go
Okay, we read that. Today, Boston State Auditor is inviting Governor Maura Healey to file an amicus brief in the Supreme Judicial Court in support of the auditor's attempt to audit the legislature in accordance with the 72% voter mandated law. Governor Healy stated on many occasions that she supports the legislative audit that was mandated by 72% of Massachusetts voters in 24. While Auditor DeZoglio very much appreciates the governor's verbal support, she's asking for tangible assistance from Governor Healy in court where it counts. This is a big deal because really what this does, it's like I can't think of the phrase. Putting your money where your mouth is that it? I don't know. I'm coming up with terrible sayings today. It happens, but really that's what is going on here, because you need to remember a lot of times these people are completely performative, right? They'll say one thing when they're up on the podium, but what they do behind the podium and behind the scenes is the exact opposite. Perfect example of this is, I'm not a professional when it comes to gun laws and all that stuff. Toby Leary's the man with that, right? I'll have him on my podcast in the future again. But she was just out, and I saw his post about Healy in support of opening up hunting on Sundays. And I'm thinking to myself, this is really something else, right? In election season, she's pandering to people is what she's doing. But she doesn't actually support what she is showing you, if that makes sense. So this puts her in the hot seat is what it does. So, and I'll guarantee you, before I even read this, they're going to come up, or she'll come up with some lame excuse, okay? I'm really surprised the auditor did this, because if Healy does not support, like if you say you support the audit, but you won't file an amicus brief on behalf of the auditor, and you can't, now, I didn't research this or anything like that, so I don't know per se, but if they can't find a loophole or a gray area where Governor Healy can't do something like that, she's in trouble. You see what I'm saying? She's in trouble because she's going to have the front facing, which is like, yeah, I voted yes. We support the audit. We wanted to go through. I'm all for transparency. I'm all for accountability. And then she doesn't actually support it with filing an amicus brief, is going to be detrimental to her getting reelected. It really and truly is. So let's read what this says. As our former Attorney General, Governor Healy understands the impact an amicus brief can have on the court. I am inviting Governor Healy to back up her claim that she supports the audit of the legislature by submitting her formal support of our office's endeavors to the SJC in writing, said Auditor DeZoglio. If the governor truly stands with the people on this audit, as she says, this is, I just can't get through this. This is an easy way to demonstrate to the public that she's really on the side of the 72%. Public comments with no action won't help us defeat the Speaker, the Senate President, and the current AG in court right now on behalf of the will of the people. The governor's submission can make all the difference on court decisions. I hope the governor does not miss this opportunity to get on the record in court where it counts, supporting due process, civil rights, and the will of the 72%. Oh my goodness. This is it's a big deal if she does it, because if Healy does it, it's going to score points for the auditor, right? unfortunately, it's going to score some points with Healy as well, right? Let's be fair, call it what it is. But if she doesn't support it, okay? If she doesn't support it, she's in trouble. I'm really surprised here's the thing about Diana, okay? The auditor. We don't agree, I've said this before, we don't agree on everything. Absolutely not. But those fringe things that we may or may not agree 100% on, we agree on what's important, if that makes sense, right? So this is the framework that Massachusetts has created. You're either far left or you're far right, and then there's some of the people that are in the middle there, and there's just very high levels of extremes on both ends of that spectrum, and this is what they want in this state. They do not want people talking to each other. They just don't want that to happen. They want the people on the left to think they're 150% correct, and they want the people on the right to think they're 150% incorrect, so that there's no dialogue between both parties. We need to change that, okay? We need to change that. There needs to be open levels of communication and open levels of dialogue, not only on the political spectrum, but also on the constituent spectrum, so that people could come together and do what's best for the state, and that's it, right? That's what realistically needs to happen. But unfortunately, here in Massachusetts, if you're anywhere towards the right, a lot of people have shame, right? They're scared to talk about these things. They're scared of being ostracized. They're scared of all these other things. And I've been saying this for a long time. I try to give you guys the arsenal to actually talk about some of these issues. And the reason that I talk about these issues in the way that I do, and the reason that I cover so many of these issues, is because I just want to get to a point where we could talk about it, right? I want to get to a point where it's normalized to talk about some of these issues, and you don't have to be politically correct. You don't have to sanitize everything down like the legacy media does here. You could talk like a normal human being with some levels of common sense and say to yourself, that's not a good idea, this is inappropriate, or whatever it may be. But for so long, people have been living, it's happened to me. Maybe I'll do a full video on this. Like, it's happened to me. And I've noticed, like, one of the turning points for me in reality was, like, even just going out, working with people or meeting people or networking or whatever, I was always careful of my speech and, like, how I talked. Not like necessarily talking professionally or articulate, but just, like, trying to toe the line and stay within the border of being politically correct on like not on certain issues, but the way I talked about certain issues or the way I phrased my feelings about certain things. And I don't want to have to do that. I don't think anybody should have to sanitize the way that they talk about something. I think that people should be honest, and I think that people should be transparent in the way that they talk. I think that's realistically a big, or at least it was a huge problem in this country. And for so long, for so many years, we couldn't say nothing. We couldn't say nothing without getting banned. My YouTube channel would have been history, many, many moons ago, right? It would have been if this was, really under Biden, or even sometimes before that too. So I want to get to a point where people are happy to have open dialogue and open conversations, and not, have like backlash on both sides. I think it needs to happen It really needs to happen in order to change the narrative here in Massachusetts. There's a lot of independent voters here, right? So you figure they could have been Republican, but they were more than likely Democrat, and they're probably not happy with either parties, right? So the only way to reel them in, and I think a lot of people think to themselves, you know what, if you're a Republican, that means you're like, and I'm not saying this is for or against, but, when you're in your state, focus on the state. Don't focus on what's happening on a federal, like, of course you could look to these things, right? But a lot of change could happen by you guys on a local level. And that's realistically what you need to be talking about. But you shouldn't be shamed, or you shouldn't, be scared to voice your opinion, and voice it in a way that's true and authentic. Like, that's really what people want to see. And that's really what people want to hear. They want to hear honest conversations. They don't want to hear this sanitized, version, or this clipped version of what is going on. You need to call it what it is. Because if you call it what it is, over time, what will happen is the language will change, right? The language will change locally, and people will start to talk about these issues more openly, right? That's what'll happen. Instead of hiding in the shadows and waiting for something to change, all of a sudden nothing changes. The elections come through, and you're stuck with the same damn people in the same damn position, except the position only gets worse. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? That's why, I mean, believe me, I could be a little even more exaggerated here, but it wouldn't be great for YouTube, would it? But that's why I try to do, that's why I try to be as honest and maybe it's not professional, call it what you want, but this is what you get, right? And I think that's how people should talk about these issues. Because right now, it's or at least it was in a lot of parts, especially here it is, but in other parts of the country it was like this too, where you couldn't even have that conversation, right? Without, like, you ever get to a point where you say something or you hear, like, this was the tell for me. You say something or you hear somebody say something that isn't like necessarily politically correct out in public, and you're like, oh my God, like that happens, right? That's over. That's done, okay? Don't even, because it's happened to me. It's happened to me in the past, right? Like, I'm being honest with you guys. I literally have felt that way. Maybe not in something that I said, but in something somebody else said, and I think to myself, I could see people, you know, they start to, like, pucker up, right? They get nervous. Why do we have to be nervous to talk about issues in a realistic way? Like, why do we have to dumb everything down? Why can't we just call things what it is? I think that if you want to make real change, in my opinion, you need to call things for what they are, right? You can't tiptoe around these issues. You need to confront these issues and talk about these issues. And I'm not always right, and neither is anybody else. But at least you have to try, right? Like, at least you have to try. And you have to be willing to make mistakes, and you have to be willing to do those things. But more importantly, you have to be willing to not feel ashamed or feel like you're going to get ostracized from a group or from your family or from your colleagues or from your coworkers or whatever it may be. And do what you need to do. Just have a friendly conversation. Like, that's it. I know a lot of times it results in, like, in the beginning, it'll start as negative, right? You're going to get a lot of pushback. But once more people get on board with, and I'm not saying I'm complete, this is just my opinion, right? But when more people start to get on board with levels of open dialogue and are willing to talk, you know, openly about things, over time, that the you know, political correctness, the narrative, and, you know, all that tiptoeing around issues changes, right? Because it starts to become reality, right? It starts to become publicly acceptable versus it not being publicly acceptable. And for the longest time, most of this stuff was not publicly acceptable to talk about, at least in the way that I think that I tried to portray some of these issues. I think that, you know, people just don't want to talk that way, right? They just don't want to. But in doing so, you're sanitizing the conversation, while the other side gets to be as radical as humanly possible. Think of it that way. Like, you know, it's like a rock meeting a hard place, as I say. But over time, both rocks start to whittle down, right? And you start to uncover what's actually there. And that's what opens up people to having a level of respect and open dialogue, right? But again, as I said in my previous video, there are some people out there that are completely unreasonable. They exist, and you may know them. They may be your family member. They may be a coworker. Just ignore them and yes them to death, okay? There's no reason wasting a breath of air on these people, because they just won't get it until we're taxed into oblivion. And, you know, every house here is $1.5 million, right? Don't worry about those people. Worry about people that are willing to have open dialogue and open conversation. But by God, please do not tone it down, right? If anything, tone it up, but be respectful, but speak your mind. So that's it. This is a big deal, okay? This is a big deal. Healy is, I'm telling you what, when she has members of her own party that are putting her in the hot seat like this, I mean, kudos to the auditor, because her job, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't want it, all right? If somebody offered me that job, I wouldn't want it. I would not want to do it, right? I would not want to do it, because she's probably made a lot of enemies along the way. But again, she's leading the way, right? That's the key here. And what happens with leaders? If something changes, everybody will follow that precedent. That's why this is so important. Do you understand? That's why this issue, it's not only about the audit, okay? The audit is one thing. Getting the audit done is one thing. Or, I'm sorry, getting the audit done. Getting to the point of getting it done after all of this, that sets a huge precedent. And this will go down as one of, in my opinion, this is going to be a huge deal. It's going to be a dramatic deal in Massachusetts, because instead of just following along and just getting in line and doing what everybody says, we have one person that went off on their own path and they're trying to pave it, right? And if it works and it eventually happens, then what'll happen is people will start to wake up even further of what's going on, because it's going to be a terrible, terrible, terrible look if this gets to go through. Not even talking about what the audit will find. At this point, who knows? They're probably in the back, you know, they're probably mixing it with the concrete, right? Like, who knows where the documents are? Who the hell knows? But the fact of just getting there and pushing through to make it to that point, in my opinion, is commendable, okay? That is a big deal, and it could really shift the narrative here in Massachusetts in terms of transparency, in terms of accountability, and also in terms of leadership. That's the way that I look at these things. I hope you guys took some things away from this. That's it. I talked a lot today. Bye-bye.
So you've had all this, you had Pfizer and AstraZeneca and 2 Modernas.
This guy's life is over.
Did you notice the paralysis 36 hours? After the fourth one, I was walking home from an event in my hometown where Dean and I both used to live, and my legs started to drag. You know, the next morning I woke up and it wasn't that bad. I rebounded. You know, it was more like a mitochondrial myopathy. where I got exhausted and the mitochondria wasn't producing and my legs started to drag. And after resting for 12 hours, I got up and was fine, but I kept declining over the next few days. And it was a week later that I had what I call a micro seizure where I blacked out while driving a school bus. And I didn't crash it, I pulled over to stop. But at that point my eyes were fluttering and my ears were buzzing. And at that point I went back to my doctor and I had my license pulled. And that's when we started looking for an MRI and finding out what it was really all about.
I mean, a lot of people
And what
say,
we
you
have
just said
discovered
what a lot of
is that
people
there
are
are two
thinking.
lesions on my body.
Especially when you start getting into like
0.8
TED
centimeters
Talks.
was
Maybe you
2.8
really want to say it on a TED Talk
covering my
stage.
C1 and C2.
You
Right up
went
by my
full throttle. Right up.
my medulla.
Welcome.
It's very
I
soft.
feel like
Is on my T4.
Right, so a bit low down on the spinal cord.
it's a joke.
And then, we have seen images of those that they are lesions on the spinal
Right, well,
cord.
what makes it funny and also
It's strange,
disturbing
isn't
is
it?
that
You
it's
took the first three
true.
and you're perfectly okay after the first
When you get into
three.
some of
Just
these
the fourth
I
one.
mean,
classes
after the first one, I felt a bit
in
woozy.
rooms with people that actually make a living off of killing their spouses.
They kind of said that might
Yeah, it's been a
happen.
business for quite some time. So a lot of people appreciate him saying that. My God, especially if you think about the history and these activists around them, and was it him and Zelensky?
That I noticed
Was it him?